I'm going to show how to make the notepads in Procreate. I've made a few. The first thing that you're going to do is, I'm going to turn all of this off, is make a canvas that's 2300 by 3000 pixels. This gives you a good starting size because we're going to shrink it down, but you don't lose that much quality. Next thing we're going to do is draw our guidelines, because you want to make sure that you're not, that you're going to have an area that's where you're going to cut the picture out of. You don't want stuff cut off that you want to keep. It also helps to make sure that you don't have white space on your notepad after you cut it out. So I turned on drawing guide, and when you click edit drawing guide, you can adjust the squares, the size of the squares, the position of the middle. My grid size is 219 pixels, and then hopefully you can see this. I moved this line on both sides till it's a little bit close to the edge, but it still gives some space, and that's where I'm going to use to do my guidelines. It's not too much into the picture where I'm going to lose a lot, but it also gives me enough room to cut off from white space. Oops. So I'm going to use the monoline pen under calligraphy. I shrunk it down to about 8%. You don't want it too thick, because if it's too thick, even though you cut on the line, it could end up still showing on your notepad. So I start at the top of the canvas. Oops. Drag all the way down on the guideline, and then if you hold your pencil down, it straightens the line. If you press on it with your finger, it snaps it to the grid. Now mine's a little off from the center, so I'm going to adjust it over till it's on that line. So now it matches up with that. For the bottom, we don't have a line to follow, but you kind of want to give the same distance that you did on the side. Same thing, hold it, snap it. Mine's got a little bit more space, so I'm going to adjust it down some. Basically, you're making this a square down in this corner. Okay. Now to make this easy, I'm going to duplicate the ones I just drew. I'm going to select them. I'm going to rotate it until it's around on the other side. So now I have all four sides, and they're pretty evenly spaced. And that is the guidelines. So the area outside, you're still going to have, if you do a background, you're still going to have your background kind of in there. But when we cut it off, you won't have white space from your printing. The next thing that you want to do is find a picture that you want to print with. I'm going with my Sylveon that I drew. You can either draw it on here. This is a good size. You can draw big and then shrink it down to fit wherever you want it, or you can copy from your gallery. To do that, just go to, oops, I got too many. Go to the one you want to copy, the image that you want to copy. Make sure whatever's on the canvas is what you want to transfer. Hit the wrench icon, click add, and then copy canvas. And then you can go back to your artwork, show you. You click the wrench icon and you click paste, and then there's the image you brought over. Make sure your background layer is off, because if you leave it on, it's going to transfer the whole background as well. I'm going to adjust it. I don't want it too big, because I don't want it to take up too much space on my notepads. These are small, but it gives me, I want it visible enough to where it's not losing quality, but not big enough to take up too much of the line space. Okay. Alright, the next thing that we're going to do is put on the top of the notepad what you want it to say. You can put to-do lists, you can make bullet points. These are just little notepads for notes for me. So I'm going to just go with that. Under inking, there's a dry ink brush that I like. If you want smooth lines, use monoline. Studio pen would be good if you want tapering lines. So I'm also gonna do it in black, that way it shows up the best on the screen. And you have guidelines to help you write better. You can also use the text tool, just add text and adjust it to the top. I like the handwritten look, so I'm going with that. Whoops, too big. And just play around with it till you get the size that you want. I think Sasha's in here somewhere. Sasha is one of my cats, and she likes attention. So you don't want to get it too close to the guideline for cutting, just in case you move the paper onto the blade or too close to the blade and you snip it a little bit. Since I don't have an image on the top, I want the notes words centered. So if you turn on snapping and move it towards the middle, a gold bar will show up, and that's your center line, so you can adjust it to make sure it fits right. I think that looks good. Now we're going to do our notepad lines. You can put however many you want on there. The ones I am showing you are going to be small. These are about 5 inches by 3 3/4 inches. So they're simple little notepads. I did my grocery list on one of these the other day. So you don't have to do a lot of lines if you don't want to, but just think of how much you would write on a notepad like this. And then I'm going to use the first line. I'm going to guide it on here. And I don't want my lines cut off, so I'm not going all the way to the edge. And then probably about 1.5 squares is good spacing for me. Think about how it looks, how you want your line spacing, how much room you want to be able to write different words. If you write big, you might want to give yourself a little more space. And these do not have to be perfect. These are handmade items, and perfect is not necessary. Okay. And those are the lines. And so I drew enough. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Not 7 lines, that's not bad at all. If you feel like it's too much spacing, if you turn on select, distort, you can shrink it some. Having snapping on will help you keep the line straight so you don't angle it weird. Then you can reconnect these. Or redraw it if you feel like it needs to be redrawn. Keep in mind your Apple Pencil is angle sensitive as well as pressure sensitive. So if you change the angle, press harder than you did on the other lines, they're going to look a little bit thicker like mine did, even though I didn't change the brush size. So that is the lines. And then if you have a brand, if you want your name on them, just so you know, make it a little bit more professional, you can add text, you can write it. I'm going to use my font, or not mine, but a font called Noteworthy. I like the way it looks. And I'm going to put my business on there. If you adjust the blue dots, it does the spacing for the actual text. And if you select it all and click the font name, you can resize it. I don't want this big. just needs to be down towards the bottom a little bit. That's that part. Yeah. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention for the fonts is dafont.com, D-A-F-O-N-T. Has a lot of free fonts that you can download. Some say if it's commercial use only or personal use only. Different licenses you may have to buy. I've used it for about 10-12 fonts, no problem. That's just one that I would recommend. So the last step we're going to do is the background colors. So you go behind everything else. I know I have other layers here. I'm going to put it behind the layers that I'm working on. And I like from Brenda Baker's Skillshare class. She has a sketchy doodling kit and it has a watercolor brush. I like the way it looks. I like the way the background turns out. That's what I use for these. Play around with the different brushes that are in the main program. If you don't have her brushes, or if you have a brush that you like that does good background coloring, you can do that. You can set up the background however you want. I'm printing from a home printer, so I want some color. I don't want a ton of color. If you get them made somewhere, you can change it however you want. So I like her pink and blues. Probably to make her stand out more, I'm going to do the pink on this side. And I kind of like to do heavy in the top right and bottom left corners. With the Brenda Baker brush, the watercolor brush, it is buildable. So as you can see, as I go back over the areas I've already colored in, it gets darker. So it's good to do that because we're going to smudge it later and bring it out a little bit. So the more you have built up there, the more it will come spread easier. Then I'm going to do blue on the bottom left corner. If you're using the watercolor brush, like I said, it gets darker as you build it, so you kind of want to start with a lighter color. If you start with the darker color, the more close it's going to get to black faster. And if you don't want a lot of black on there, especially when you're trying to make a notepad for writing on, you want to be able to read if you write with black ink, a pencil, things like that. So just something to keep in mind. And then I'm going to do the blue here. And I'm going to build it up. So don't lose too much of her as I'm adding the blue. So I think that works good. And then I'm going to smudge the colors out to make it look more like watercolor. Under my smudge tool, I am using the same brush. If you want to try out, like I said, different brushes, do different things. Depending on what you use for your original brush, you may try the same brush under smudge or find something else. Airbrush, soft airbrush would be good. Or soft brush, sorry, under airbrushing would be good to kind of smudge it out a little bit if you use a different brush set for coloring. So now I'm going to smudge this out. I'm going to bring it towards the center. And I lost some of my darker blue over here. Bring it towards the center. But then I'm also going to bring it back from the center so it lightens it up in the middle, but also has a little bit of coloring. And in the corners, I kind of push it away a little bit so it kind of fades a little bit better together. Just play around with it, see what you like the best. Now I'm going to do the same on the pinkish side. If you start in the area where the watercolor brush is stronger, it's going to push out more color. If you start in the area where there's technically no color, it's going to fade out the color stronger. So I'm going to fade it around notes a little bit better. Now I'm going to add some of that pink back around the edge. There. So that gives it a good watercolor effect. I like the spacing on the lines. I like the business on there. I like the Sylveon. I like the notes. So I feel like this is really good. And so you can see I have my background past the red lines, but that just gives me, just to make sure I don't have any white space around my notepad. Okay, so I'm going to save this because I want a file to work with if I decide to import it into something else. I'm going to click Save Image. I'm saving it to my iPad itself. Save it wherever you save your images, typically. Then I'm going to go to Gallery, and I already have one set up. I'm going to kind of show you what I did with it though. Turn these off. So I turned on the drawing guide. I clicked on where it says like pixels or the number of what the grid size is. I changed it to inches and I clicked 1, and that's my spacing for it. I didn't put this square all the way to the corner because I need to make sure that when I'm printing, my printer's not gonna cut anything off in the print margins. So I kind of stopped it right there at the corner. Oops, I keep changing the color. Okay, so now we're going to insert our photo. So yes, it starts off really large. Turn off snapping. And the final size of these, like I said, is 5 inches by 3 3/4. You can kind of use it as a guide of how you want it to set up. But my printer, like I said, shrinks down because of print margins. So I'm gonna go a little bit bigger than 5 inches because I know it's gonna shrink, but I still fit forward to a page. I'm going to, so this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm gonna go about there. This is kind of a guesstimate work for me, just to try to make sure that they fit I can fit 4 on the same page. If you want to do more, if you want to do smaller ones, like little mini notepads would be cute. Just be mindful of your image to make sure it fits and you can see it. But this is a bit guesswork to get 4 to fit on one page. See, this is a little too big, so one's getting cut off. I do have room over here for it. One thing to remember, if you drag off from the canvas and you deselect, it cuts it off. So be careful if you slide it off and accidentally cut anything off, because it will be gone. And see, my margins are still too small. So I'm going to delete that one. Resize this one a little bit so I can try to fit 2 on the top row. And it's okay if they overlap a little bit. It's not over the cutting line. So as long as you can still see your red line, you are good to go. And then I line up my red marks from left to right. Sometimes when you're duplicating it, it will kind of skew this by 1 or 2 pixels. So as you can see, about 3 pixels is, or 2 pixels is different. Even though my red's lining up, my top and my bottom weren't kind of lining up, but it still is going to fit fine. And when I print it, it's still going to look pretty much the same. I've done 9 of these now. I haven't noticed a big difference when I'm cutting it. So those are now lined up. I kind of want to get this one off the edge a little bit. I'm going to group these because I don't want to shift them and lose anything. If you tap to the left the left circle, it will just slowly nudge it over. And then I need some room, so I'm going to do the same thing on the top, bump it up to the top a little bit, so I still have white space, not a ton, and I have room. So I'm going to duplicate this group, slide it down, make sure that I can see the red cut lines on both sides. I still have my cut line on the bottom. Oh, they're already perfectly lined up. So I check my center square. Those are lined up. My sides are lined up. So that is my finished sheet. Let's see.